Okay, so this is my Titans Season 4, Episode 9 review. And this episode is basically why I stopped watching Doom Patrol. It was just so weird. My brain is in constant free fall trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So, anyway, we finally see what happens to Gar. And, so Gar ends up going through the red because he asked to, take me to the red, which I don't know, a guy that just mysteriously uses another man's body to communicate with you, to tell you that if you want to live, do this. Weird. Maybe you don't want to do that. But Rachel did say that Gar actually saved them all, so I have no idea what's going on. So he's going through the red until he's plucked out by the same person who took over this other person's body to let him know that he should do this. And they're talking, and he's explaining how he's connected to the red, but not, but more so than anybody else he's ever seen because he's a changeling, and so his connection's really strong. And so then they get attacked. And I mean, at first Gar's like, "Yeah, I would like to go home now. Take me home. This is weird. I want to go home." And Dominic's like, "No, you can't because this." He even tries to use the red to go home, and the red is not listening to him. So, then they seemingly get attacked by soldiers. And I say seemingly because of what happens afterwards. So they get attacked by soldiers. And Gar's like, what the hell? What's going on? And before he was like, yeah, just take me home. And now he's more amiable to help Dominic. Nothing like being attacked to do that. Okay, fine. So then he explains what's happening. And he gives them this little potion. And it turns out, first off, that both he and this guy were affected with the same virus. Which just so happens that Niles Calder came up with a antidote for. And but he said that it was from the virus itself, not the antidote. But anyway, and so at this point, he wants to give Gar this potion, and Gar's like, "What is it gonna make me grow? It's gonna make me shrink?" And he goes, "It's gonna do a little bit of both, but it's gonna destroy you." Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody said this is going to destroy you and doesn't explain what that means, I wouldn't take it. It's not like, oh, the old you will be gone and you're going to be reborn or whatever. This is going to destroy you. Okay. So, of course, Gar takes it because reasons. And he starts hallucinating. There's multiples of him running around. And then he starts what seems like hallucinations. I mean, he's going through the red, but at the same time, it's like he's just in his own head. It was very bizarre. So then there's a version of himself driving the RV, and Rachel is talking to him. Now, it makes sense that it was both Rachel and Jinx who he encountered because they both have magical abilities, so it makes sense that they're the ones that... But it was still, this whole episode, you just trying to grasp onto anything that made sense was very hard. So Rachel is explaining how something. And so then he ends up back at the fire, and he seemingly Rachel is still in front of him, but it turns out it's the Freedom Beast. So then he tries again and he sees Jinx. And I mean, I do believe that in some ways this was Rachel and then Jinx, because they came across as people who sounded like themselves. Like Jinx, giving the double bird to the Titans because she ended up dying again. I still think that she's gonna come back. Obviously, not just like this. I mean, I think that she is going to come back. How? I do not know. But she is going to come back. And, so she's explaining how there is no individual, everything's interconnected, blah, blah, blah. And again, he thinks that she's at the fire when it's the Freedom Beast. And same thing with his younger self, which we saw earlier on, as the episode started, where at first I wasn't sure if this was truly his memory or a twisted version, but no, this was his memory. And again, he comes back, he sees his younger self by the fire, and he's in pain because he sees this gorilla being experimented on, it looks like. So I don't know if he was seeing what was happening in the lab or if he was seeing something else. But, that this particular zoo wasn't being that kind to their animals or something. That wasn't made clear, but there's very little made clear. So they decide that they're going to go and attack the lab and release these animals. Okay, fine. So they do that, and thankfully Gar keeps his humanity because the before I continue, it's always fun to see Gar fighting not as any particular beast, because the actor is a martial artist, so it's nice to actually see him do his thing. But he now can turn into beasts seamlessly, whereas before he had to think really hard in order to transform. It's a seamless turning into a gorilla, turning into a bird. He can just seamlessly transition now. So the scientist explains why this ape cannot be released. And Dominic basically fuses this scientist with the beast. And Gar is like, oh my god, what's happening here? So he's like, yeah, this isn't his lab. This lab belongs to someone else. So he goes to this office and he sees a letter and it's signed Niles Calder. Because of course it is. So now Gar is caught up to what the Doom Patrol know about Niles, and apparently what Dominic knows about Niles, is that he caused the very accidents that gave these people their powers and created the Doom Patrol. And that this is their first time actually being out of the red. That this whole time Gar was seeing what happened before. And Gar's like, but I was fighting them. And So Dominic is trying to convince him. It sounds like Dominic wanted to go have a life, and so he wanted Gar to replace him. And Gar's like, you know what? I'll protect the red like you want me to, but I'm not going to just sit around and twiddle my thumbs. I'm connected with everyone and everything, so why should I be, stuck alone? I'm going to go help my friends and protect the red at the same time. And Dominic's like, no, wait, don't. I think he honestly wanted a replacement so he could go have a life or die or whatever. That he felt like he was being banished, that he couldn't leave that cave or something. So Gar's like, yeah, I'm leaving now, bye. And Dominic's like, but you don't understand what you're doing. And he's like, for the first time I actually do. So he decides to go back into the red. And that's where we see nods to other Arrowverse shows. The first one being The Flash. We see Grant Gustin's Flash running. And I didn't catch it, but I don't know. Did we see Superman or Supergirl? I'm not sure. But we also saw, Swamp Thing. We saw, we saw something else. I can't remember now what else it was. So he ends up on Stargirl's Earth. And she being the nice person that she is, wanted to make sure he's okay because he seemed a little out of it, which can't say I blame him. He's still figuring this out. And he asks the Red to take him back to his family. And it takes him a second because, there's a brief pause where Stargirl's looking at him like, what the hell? What's wrong with you? And then he finally is able to get back into the Red. And he ends up landing hard on an Earth. And we see Vic walk in. And at this point, Gar is unconscious. And he runs up to him and says, Beast Boy? And he then calls for help. Which I don't know why, because, he's the science guy. He's also a cyborg, so carrying him shouldn't be a problem. But he calls for help. And that's how the episode ends. And, so yeah, it's very interesting that the Red interpreted his family as being Doom Patrol rather than the Titans. But it could also be that this is happening while most of the Titans are at Call's Folly, so in another dimension. So it would be easier to just put him somewhere where there's a actual house for him to drop into. I don't know. Like I said, I have no idea what's happening. But he's back in the world of the living, supposedly. So hopefully he will be able to get better, because he's obviously still figuring this stuff out. Hopefully he will and be able to get back to the Titans. Which, now that he understands his connection to everything and everyone, it's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening when he confronts the Church of Blood. Because that's going to change things. Now, even though Roberta did mention that it's going to be Corey who's going to be taking down Sebastian. But I don't know if that's going to happen because they did that one already. So maybe again she's going to find some other way around this. And maybe it's going to be Gar or Rachel. I'm still thinking Rachel because, siblings, half siblings. So yeah, this was, as far as what I could explain, a very short episode because this was just so weird. Um Let me see. Um I don't know. I think the Lex Luthor that they showed was, I think, from Smallville. I think that was him. I don't know. It was, but he saw Gar. It was, like I said, when he was in the red, it was just really trippy. So of course he would end up with the Doom Patrol because if anything in this comic books universe is trippy, it's the Doom Patrol. So yeah, I'm excited to see next episode, and hopefully things will be a bit more normal. So I think I've got everything on this episode covered, and with that, I will see you guys next time.